Hey everybody, happy Saturday evening live tutorial stream. How's everybody doing out there wherever you are today? I hope everybody has had and is continuing to have a fantastic Saturday. It was a delightfully busy day here at the Beating Dreams. Hot because summer in Dallas. It started and it's never ever going to end, I think. But we got to see some old familiar faces here at Beating Dreams and some fabulous people that we love, so it's always a good day when you get to see the good peeps in person. So tonight we're doing a sheet metal project. This is our Casablanca necklace, which is, you know, basically just a random name that I came up with because of the vaguely Moroccan shapes that I chose to make it. But this particular technique, you can do, once again, you can do any shapes you want. So it's basically just cutting and texturing sheet sheet metal. Also, it is holy exposure Batman. Let's make that not so bright, shall we? So yeah, basically just cutting and texturing sheet metal. So in that sense, it's really not anything new. It's not anything that we haven't done before on the Beating Dreams stream, but hopefully, there we go, that's not quite so obnoxiously bright. Hopefully we'll give you a couple of new things about texturing. We are going to also be sawing in addition to cutting with metal shears, because we have this little bit here that we're actually cutting from the inside border of our main pendant shape. So when you're cutting metal from the inside with no, visible track to the outside of the shape, you have to do that with a saw. You can't do that with the shears. We're going to be doing the rest of it with the shears. We're going to be making these little half moon pieces, which I think are just kind of a fun sort of centerpiece for the necklace. And then our little pendant piece, and I have a labradorite drop that I'm going to put in mine today. So let's talk tools and supplies for this evening's tutorial. You are going to need some sheet metal. I am using 24 gauge bronze sheet metal. You can basically do this in any sheet metal you can get your hands on. That's sterling silver, gold filled, brass, bronze, copper, anything you can get your hands on, and 24 gauge is going to work great for this. I will say, if you have any kind of hand strength issues, if you have any arthritis, or just, don't have a whole lot of strength in your hands, I highly recommend copper. Copper is the softest of all of the sheet metals that you can get your hands on. It's going to be the easiest to cut. So if you've got, like I said, if you've got hand issues, copper is the way to go. The bronze and the brass and even sterling silver are going to be a little bit more stiff, and they're going to be a little more difficult to cut. They're going to be harder on your hands. You could use 22 gauge if you wanted to. 22 gauge is an absolute bear to cut with the shears. I'm just going to tell you from personal experience, but if you want, to wrestle that bear, then good on you, go for it. You could also go for 26 gauge. It would be a little bit less sturdy, but once again, if you've got issues, hand strength issues, and you need something that's easier to cut, you could always bump down to 26 gauge, being a slightly thinner sheet metal than our 24 gauge. We're also going to need just a little bit of 24 gauge wire. I'm going to use some 24 gauge gold filled. You really don't need a lot of wire for this project. Literally, it's only as much as you need to wrap this teardrop on in the center of your pendant. So 3-4 inches is going to be more than sufficient. You're going to need some kind of a pretty focal bead. So I have this lovely flashy labradorite that I'm going to use tonight. You're going to need, if you want to make this into a functional necklace, you're going to need chain and clasp. Now, if you have an excess of time on your hands, you theoretically could take this half moon motif and you could extend that out for the full length of a necklace. So I'm obviously not going to do that just because of time on stream. So I'm doing the cheater method of finishing it out with a manufactured chain, but you could totally do this and make this into a chain. And then of course we can extrapolate where it doesn't have to be the little half moon shapes. You can be circles, it can be squares, it can be triangles. You can make your own, kind of metal chain with any shape and with any metal. So bear in mind that if you have the time, that would be a really cool and unique way to finish out this piece. And then you are going to need jump rings to put everything together. I have bronze jump rings. These are a nice heavy gauge. They are an 18 gauge bronze jump ring, and they're actually kind of big. They're like a 7mm jump ring, just because I want my components to have a lot of movement to them. So that's tools. I'm sorry, that's supplies. Tools are upcoming. Guess what? There's a fair number of them for tonight's class, because we've got all the hammering tools, plus the cutting tools, plus the texturing stuff. So let's start with metal shears. That's how we're going to do most of the cutting on our sheet metal. You're also going to need a jeweler's saw with a 2/0 or similar saw blade, so it's kind of a medium fine saw blade. You're going to need 320 sandpaper. That's going to be both for sanding your edges and for texturing the surface of your piece. You're going to need steel wool, 000 or quadruple 0 for finishing your edges as well. You are going to need your bench block or bench block equivalent, whatever you've been hammering on. This whole time is going to work dandy for this project. You're going to need a chasing hammer. And we're going to be using the round side of the chasing hammer tonight, so if you don't have a chasing hammer, a regular old ball peen hammer will work just fine. You're going to need a hole punch or a drill. Anything you can do with a hole punch, you can also do with a drill. You're going to need your pliers, and you're really only going to need your wire cutters and then 2 pairs of chain nose pliers. So chain nose pliers are the flat ones, they're the ones we use for grabbing things. So we need 2 grabby pliers and a wire cutter. I usually just have my round nose pliers in the same pile, but I don't think we're going to use it for tonight's class. Nope, I'm a rotten liar. You need your round nose pliers too. Put those over with the pliers you're going to use for class tonight. And there's probably something I've forgotten, but I will let you know what it is when I remember that I have forgotten it. Alright, so we're going to start by making a couple of little templates out of cardboard for cutting our shapes. So first thing that I'm going to use this little half moon that I made previously, but this one, this little kind of pear-shaped one that I've made, I need to alter that a little bit because this labradorite teardrop is wider than the quartz teardrop that I used for my prototype. So what I'm going to do, and this is actually a really kind of a nifty, that's not what I need at all. Be right back. Okay, so when you're making a template for something like this, one of the big concerns when you're freehanding and you're like me and you can't really make anything symmetrical to save your life is, of course, making a symmetrical shape. So the easiest way to do that is to actually, go back to when we were, cutting snowflakes as children, and basically we're going to, fold our template material in half, draw half of that, cut it out, and then we will magically have a symmetrical shape. Now the cardboard doesn't fold very nicely, so what I've started doing that I really like is just taking 2 cardboards and taping them together, and then you can get a nice fold on the center. So I like the overall shape of this, so I'm going to trace. I did draw this freehand the first time, by the way, but I like the shape of this, so I'm going to trace it onto my cardboard, the outside shape. Trying not to, trace my fingernails in the process. Okay, and then I'm going to draw the center bit, but I'm going to make it slightly different shape. So I'm going to make it wider and shorter, so that'll just hang right in there. So we'll see how that looks. The other good thing about making this out of cardboard first is I can cut it, and if I hate it, I can redo it without having, spent all the time to cut my metal. So I'm just gonna cut my paper out on the lines theoretically. Yes, I learned how to do that in kindergarten. Obviously, some lessons have stuck with me better than others. Okay, so this is my new, see, thank you, Sharon. Sharon noticed that these are our old punch cards that we used to use that we don't use anymore because we have a computerized system. So yes, it is a good repurpose every worker. It's awesome. I think that is going to work fantastically well. Okay, so this is my shape. So this one that I did before kind of reminds me of a pear. This one reminds me a little more of an avocado. So apparently I have fruits on the brain today. And then I am going to use the same little moon shape that I used on my prototype, because that one is going to work just fine for me. So now I'm going to grab my sheet metal. I'm going to see, I'm hoping I can get most of this out of this little piece of sheet metal, just because it's way easier to cut on a smaller piece, but I have a big sheet if I need it. So I'm going to go ahead and trace this onto my sheet metal with my Sharpie. So just hold it down and trace. I realize that this part is super exciting. It's very suspenseful. And don't forget to trace your inner shape as well. Now, if you're having issues with the shifting, kind of like I was, if it gets to the point where it's just intolerable for you, you can just stick it down with a little bit of rubber cement. The rubber cement will hold it down onto your sheet metal without leaving a residue. So it's a really good adhesive to use for things like that, because you don't have to worry about somehow getting it off of your metal afterwards. All right, and then I'm going to make 3 of these little half moons. And the cool thing about metal is it's not like fabric. It doesn't have a grain, so I don't have to have these all facing the same way on the metal in order for this to work. So I'm just going to trace 3 of those. That's 2. One more. And I'm not being super precise with that because these are a little bit more organic, and that's fine. It also looks like I am going to get all of them on this smaller piece of sheet metal, so that's awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to cut all of these out using my metal shears. So this is my trusty Eurotool metal shears. I love these guys. They're getting harder to find. There used to be a couple of Etsy sellers that sold these, and most of them don't anymore. They're not an inexpensive metal shears. There's a lot of inexpensive, so I'm just literally going to cut out on the lines on my sheet metal. There are a lot of less expensive metal shear alternatives out there, and then there are tin snips. One of the popular things among metal smithing groups is always the Joyce Chen kitchen shears, the cut anything ones. And they all work. I'm just a huge fan of this particular metal shears because it does curves really, really well. And cutting curves in metal is not quite as easy as cutting curves in paper or cardboard. So I really love the fact that these shears make a really nice curve. I also love that the edges are not serrated. So you get a smooth cut. Okay, you don't get little indentions from your serrated edge. We have one client for whom we do primarily fit of her cut metal pieces, and she uses serrated shears, and it just adds so much time to the finishing because you've got to sand away all of those little serrated cuts, which is unfun, especially since she always seems to be on a deadline, and the deadline always seems to be, yesterday. Not that I would know anything about that, but at least I try not to inconvenience anyone with my procrastination but myself. I have varying degrees of success in that, but I do try. Hashtag life goals. So I'm cutting out, that's my second moon, and when you get to the end of your cut, a lot of times you can just kind of wiggle this and it'll break off. That will leave a little burr on my metal, but since I'm going to sand these anyway, it doesn't matter so much. Of course, the deadline's always yesterday. Or sometimes it's, you know, tomorrow, but we're not open tomorrow, which once again makes it yesterday. Oh, goodness. So I hope everyone had a good Saturday. I hope some people got to do some relaxing things. We have travelers from abroad here at the Beating Dreams, people from other states who we've seen on our streams and have now seen in person, which is very exciting. And I myself traveled to the wilds of Denton today, which really isn't that far away, but when you're stuck on the freeway in 100-degree heat in traffic, it seems like far away. I mean, not to be whiny like some of our clients, but it's a long-ass drive in 100-degree heat. Thankfully, going back was quicker than going there, because express lanes. Okay, so now I'm cutting out my little avocado here. And notice when I'm cutting my metal, I'm not snipping my shears to the end of them. I'm only going to do that at the end of my cut, because every time you snip to the end of the shears, you're going to get a little sharp spot on your metal. And once again, that's just making more work for you. That's more things that you're going to have to sand or file off in order that you're not making something that's going to lacerate someone or, you know, hurt their clothing. Because as I have said pretty much ad nauseum on the Beating Dreams stream, there is nothing more off-putting to a potential client or even a gift recipient than jewelry that tries to eat them or eat their clothing. Cool meals. Right? Yes, they are having a heat wave in Canada. They're at 90 today and heading up towards 100. Hot in California. Ooh, lemonade and cheese dip. Lori, you're the nicest mean person I know on the internet. I'm just saying. Okay, so now it's time for me to cut out the center of my little avocado. So this is going to happen with my saw, and it's unfortunately going to happen mostly off camera because it's hard for me to get a good camera position for my sawing. But the first thing I have to do, so if my goal is to excise this little bit from the center of my metal, the first thing I need to do is I need to make myself a hole. I need to make a way, you know, to get my saw blade in so that I can cut that out. So I'm going to take my screw down metal punch, and it doesn't really matter where I punch that hole as long as it is inside of the area that the area that you want to remove. Seriously, Crafty Skull, we are at some point, I swear to God, we're going to get a party bus and we are going to do a loop around the U.S. and we're going to pick up everybody and then we're all going to Lori's for dinner. I think Beating Dreams is going to have to be closed because I'm pretty sure the Beating Dreams staff will not let me go without them. Also, Lori, on an interesting note, I totally had to resist today because somebody had 2 electric smokers that they were practically giving away. They were selling them for $50 a piece. And you really had to sit down and have the talk with myself of like, okay, you really don't have time to add smoking to your repertoire. You really, really don't have the time. I think my friend Michael, who does smoke things, I'm pretty sure that he grabbed one of them, so that means that I will still have access to smoked meat, and I won't have to smoke it myself. So I feel like that's a win-win situation, is just, you know, being adjacent to the smoked meat, especially since, you know, Michael lives 5 minutes away from me as opposed to another country. But I really, like, it just took me, I had to have a solid moment with myself to be like, just don't do it. Don't do it. You don't need it. But anyway. Alright, so now I'm going to take my metal, which I've punched my hole in, and I'm going to take my saw blade. So what I've done is I've released my saw blade from the top of my saw. So this is just a typical jeweler's saw, which is also called a coping saw in the tool world. So it's just kind of, you know, half square saw frame, and so the blade, which is right here, goes in at the bottom. There's a screw at the bottom and a screw at the top. So I've unscrewed the top of the blade, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to thread that through the hole that I punched, and then I'm going to load the top of the blade back into the top of my saw. I'm pressing it against the table because jeweler saws are like guitar strings. They don't work unless there's tension on them. So now I've got my metal on my saw. Now I'm going to go to my bench pin, which is, I wonder if I can get a decent angle at this. That's my bench pin. Okay, I'm going to try this. We're going to see how this works. So then this sits on my bench pin like so. Alright, well, it's a little dim, but it's better than nothing. Okay, so it sits on my bench pin like so, and then I'm just going to start sawing towards my line. Alright, once I've reached my line, I'm just going to turn carefully my saw. So my bench pin has this V slot, so I've got my metal is spanning the V, and I'm supporting my metal with my fingers on both sides of the V. What you want is the maximum amount of stability possible. The less your metal moves, the less likely it is you're going to break the saw blade. Alright, when I reach this point, I'm just going to turn. So when I turn, I'm just going to kind of tread water with my saw blade while I'm turning the metal until my saw blade is lined up with my next line. So the saw blade basically only goes forward. Forward is its only direction. It doesn't go sideways, it doesn't go backwards, it only goes forwards. Now, I am not in an optimal position for sawing right now. Like, if you're doing this in your own workspace, you want to be a little further away than I am. I mean, seriously, my chest is like right here. I'm practically hugging my bench pin. That's because of the size of my streaming area. Usually I like to sit back a little bit further so that, like, when my arms are resting at the midpoint of my body, then, you know, that's the distance of my bench pin. So right now, hey, Amy! So right now, like, where my hand is here, which is, you know, on the end of my bench pin, that's where ideally I would like to be positioned. But once again, there's this thing here that's the end of my streaming area, and it don't move. So we make it work. You can watch my concentrating sawing phase. Alright, once again, I'm at another point, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn. Now notice that I'm actually, at this point, I'm supporting by reaching through my saw frame. You may or may not have noticed that because of the dim lighting, but there are no teeth on the back of the blade, so it's perfectly safe for me to even put my finger right against that saw blade if I wanted to, though you can get a little bit of a friction burn that way. We missed seeing you too, Amy. I'm sorry you had a series of unfortunate events, though. Is everybody okay? As long as no Amy's were harmed in the series of unfortunate events. Or animals or Amy children. Okay, so I'm getting to the end of my cut. That's my beginning line. This is where you need to be just a little bit. Oh dear, I'm so sorry. Sorry to make you nervous, Crafty Skull, but it's all good. I'm pretty good with the saw, and it moves through the metal at a predictable rate. This point right here, this is where you need to be cautious, because when I reach the end of my cut, my saw is basically going to jump forward. So when you're reaching the end of your cut, you want to make sure that you don't have your fingers in front of the saw blade. So I've got my fingers well out of the path of my blade because it is going to jump forward a bit. See, did you see? It just, so if my finger had been there, I would have gotten cut, but my finger was out of the way, so I am all good. Okay, so there is my little piece that I've cut out, and that's it for the saw blade. I can take my bench pin off, and that's awesome of you, Amy. You are an amazing mom for doing that, but you can always follow apart with us here on stream because we are here for you. Because you got to have your own support system too, girl, or you're going to go crazy. Okay, so now I've got my cutout, and I've got my little half moons. Also, I've totally not got my camera actually focused on any of that. Hey, look, now you can see things. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bevel the edges of these with my hammer. So beveling the edge is the first step to finishing the edge and making it not sharp. Because right now, you definitely would not want to run your finger down the edge of any of these, particularly with a lot of pressure, because you definitely would cut yourself. By the end of this project, you should be able to run your finger down the edge of it with as much pressure as you want without cutting yourself. Schmether is hanging out with we had a last minute surprise in-person Rita and friend. Hello everyone! So Schmether's over there with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chasing hammer, and I'm going to have to do some of this off camera because otherwise I'm going to bash my camera. And I'm going to take the round end of my chasing hammer, and I'm going to go ahead and tap the edge of my metal. And so what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to basically hit half on and half off my metal so I make a bevel. Crafty Skull Corvus asks, where do we get the sheets of metal from? There are lots of places that you can get sheets of metal from. I get mine from Rio Grande, which is a jeweler supply in New Mexico. They're great. They're not the cheapest, but they're the easiest and most convenient for me. There are lots of sellers on Etsy who sell sheet metal. There's a great company out in New York called Metalliferous, though God help you if you go on their website, you will stay there forever and you will want all of the metal things. So, you know, you may or may not want to try that, but metalliferous.com, they do all the sheets of metal as well. You can also, if you are the adventuresome type and you're looking for the best deal, if there's a roofing supply near you, you can usually get sheets of copper and sometimes brass and bronze from the roofing supply as well. And they usually have the best prices on small scraps and small sheets because, of course, that's not what they're in the business for. That's all of their waste material that they're just trying to get rid of. But the quickest and easiest is Rio Grande, riogrande.com. They've got all of the metals. They've got jeweler's brass, bronze, copper in all of the gauges. They're in New Mexico. They ship typically same day or next day as far as like pulling and shipping the items out. And you being in California, I would imagine it's probably similar to us in Texas where UPS ground gets to you in 2 days, which is nice if you want fast turnaround. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to pound around all of this exterior. And you'll notice you can still see some of my Sharpie on there, and that's probably going to go away through most of my finishing process. Anything that's left at the end of it, I can take off with some rubbing alcohol. Also, I forgot to do the sound warning. It's going to be loud for a bit here on the Beating Dreams stream, so if you need to turn me down, please feel free. See, I knew I was going to smack my camera. Okay, so that's all the way around the outside of that. Now I'm also going to bevel the inside as well, because even though that's not something that most people are going to be touching, we still want it to look nice and feel nice. so that's my inside bevel. All right, and then I am, for the sake of time, I'm gonna alter my design a little bit, and I'm just gonna do one of these little half moons. I'm not gonna do 3 for tonight's project. I'm pretty sure if I do 1, you all can extrapolate what happens when you do 3. So same thing. First thing I'm gonna do though is see how curvy this is from being cut. This is something that happens when you cut with a metal shear, so I'm gonna take a mallet and I'm just gonna flatten that out. Just so it's a little bit easier to work with. And then I'm gonna bevel the edges of that one as well. Also, by the way, for anybody who was watching last night's stream, I found my nail. It was on the flow. And it was not on the floor under Robin's bed. It was on the floor under my workbench. Okay, so now I've got this piece and this piece beveled. Okay, so if I were doing 3 of my little crescent moons, I would just do exactly the same thing 3 times. Now, something that I did do on my prototype that I'm going to do again is I did chop the ends off of my little crescent moons because 2 reasons. Number 1, ouch. Number 2, when you've got a point that's that long, you can't put your hole, like you can't punch a hole, you know, that close to the point and have it be secure. So you got to bring it back a little bit. Makes it difficult for your jump ring to actually make the travel distance that it needs to. So I'm just going to take my shears and I'm just going to blunt the ends off just a bit. And then I can grab a file and just kind of round those ends out a little bit, just make them look a little prettier. And in 24 gauge metal, it's pretty easy. If you've got a nice sharp file, it doesn't take much. And while I'm at it, I think I'm going to do the same thing to the edges of this. Just once again, give them a little bit more of a rounded look so they don't, because even if they're not actually ouchy and stabby, if they look stabby and ouchy, if they look like they could puncture you, you're still gonna get the same response of, oh, I don't like that. That looks sharp. That looks painful. You know, it's something that's as much mental sometimes as it is physical. So now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take my steel wool, fine steel wool, around all the edges. Now this is definitely a trick that I wish somebody had told me sooner in my career as a metalsmith. So when you're trying to finish an edge, I was under the delusion for many years that what you were supposed to do is you were supposed to file the edge, and that made it smooth. That is not even a little bit true, okay? Files are for moving metal. They're for shaping metal. They are not for smoothing metal, okay? Sandpaper, steel wool, these things are for smoothing metal, and so steel wool will actually help you get a really nice, just smooth, silky edge on your metal with practically, I mean, I'm not going to say with no effort, but with very little effort. And I do want to steel wool the inside as well. Once again, it's not something that people are going to be touching, but it's not something you want to be stabby either. Okay, so that's my little centerpiece, and then this is my half moon. And once again, if I had 3 half moons, I would just be doing the same thing to all of them. Now let's talk about texture while I'm doing this. So there's a number of ways you can texture your metal, and all of them are valid and all of them will work for this particular project. So, and we've done most of them on the Beating Dreams stream. So you can take your chasing hammer and you can just hammer all over the whole thing. For hammered texture, you can use a texturing hammer, a riveting hammer, a chisel hammer, any kind of hammer that's designed for texturing metal. You can hammer that on your metal. You can use a metal stamp and make kind of a repeating texture with that. You can leave it exactly like this. Yes, exactly. I love that ASO says the middle could be grabbed by a kid or a grabby adult. Exactly true. Yeah. And yeah, we definitely do have some clients who who I would qualify as grabby adults who are like, oh, I love that pendant, let me see it. And you're like, okay, hey, personal space. Here, let me take it off and hand it to you. Can you get the heck out of my bubble, especially during the pandemic? Sorry. Going back to texturing. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to do a sanded texture, which I think we've done before. I honestly can't remember because I've done so many things on this stream. So I'm going to take my 320 grit sandpaper and I'm just going to make a sanded texture on the surface of my metal. So a couple of cool ways you can work with a sanded texture. Oh dear, no, wake up screen. I hate it when my computer decides that the screen should turn off in the middle of the stream. I'm like, no, wait, come back. And yes, I realize that's a setting that I can change. I just only remember it when I'm in the middle of a stream.
That's so cool.
So, when you're texturing with sandpaper, you'll notice from my prototype that you can see the direction of the strokes, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to try this on this one. I'm going to do circular. So I'm going to fold my sandpaper up and I'm going to sand in little circles. Which kind of makes more of a non-directional, or maybe it's an omnidirectional sanding pattern. It's kind of cool. I like it. I can get down with it. But it is definitely different than, what I did here, where I definitely, I was very directional with my sanding. You're kind of radiating outwards from the center. So just see the exact same materials were used, but you get two completely different looks. And here's the cool thing is if you decide you don't like it, just go back over it. That's the cool thing about sanding textures is if I would decide I want to, okay, I don't like the rounds, I want to do a very definite horizontal sanding pattern. Okay, fine. Go for it. I have to do it on the other side. But it's literally just that easy to change. So see, now I have, instead of my omnidirectional, I have a very definite horizontal sanding pattern. So it's kind of cool because, yes, if you're wishy-washy enough, eventually you will sand away your entire piece of metal. That's going to take a while. So hopefully you're going to hit on a texture you like before then. I'm going to do the same thing on my little half moon, and I'm going to do that same sanding pattern. So I've landed on horizontal. So that's what we're going to go with. Horizontal sanding. Alright, so now it's time to punch some holes. And I am a huge fan of marking my holes before I punch them because I like to stupid-proof things. Why? Because sometimes I'm a big fat stupid. So, this is how this is going to hang. Alright, so where do we need holes? We need a hole here, and we need a hole here. We need a hole here. Actually, like be marking these instead of just pointing at them. So we need one there. We need one there. We need one in the middle of this here. Okay, so my problem here is this isn't actually symmetrical. Fix this with a file. So files are for changing the shape of metal. That's better. Sometimes after you've changed your shape of the file, you got to go back with your steel wool just to make sure that it's nice and smooth. Alright, so we need there, and then we need a hole at either end of this to attach to our chain. Once again, if we were doing 3 of these, then we would repeat this twice more on our outside bits, but unless you're making other pendants, which you could if you wanted to, you would not put that hole in the middle. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my screw down hole punch to punch my holes. And screw down hole punches, for anybody who's not super familiar with them, is that we, wow, that took a very weird tangent syntax-wise. I don't really know where that came from. So let's try that again. For those of you who aren't super familiar with screw down punches, usually they come with 2 different hole sizes, a bigger one and a smaller one. We're using the smaller one tonight. That is a 1.6 millimeter hole. It is the same size as a 14 gauge wire. So we're just going to screw that down until it's resting on our dot, and then we're going to continue to rotate that until it pops through our metal. You can tell it's gone through because it's going to be harder and then it's going to abruptly become easier. And then we're going to go backwards. Okay, but how do we have a leaderboard? I'm confused.
You can gift your way to the top or cheer your way to the top.
Oh, interesting.
See? Cheer now to be number 1.
Okay, well,
I should cheer now to be number 1. I don't know how to do that.
right, well, it has, I'm sure, something to do with points or something. Okay, so this is a thing right here. This is a thing that you need to think about when you're using punches rather than drills, okay? You may or may not be able to see that, but see? This is literally as far as my punch will reach into my metal. Like, it won't go any further. It's right up against the break of my punch. My little dot where I need to punch, it's right there. It doesn't quite reach. So there's a couple of ways to get around this. They do make punches with, and I'm going to say this on stream, but it's the proper terminology. They make punches with a deeper throat that will go farther into your metal, or you could just at this point decide that you're going to use your drill, which is what I'm going to do, because I still have the bit in it from last night's tutorial, which is going to work just fine and dandy. So I'm going to drill that particular hole instead of punching it, because once again, I mean, it's true, Amy. It is actually the proper terminology, much as it frightens me to say it on stream. Alright, so I'm just going to drill that. Oh, dears. That was all kinds of exciting. Alright, so there's that hole. Successfully made with the help of the Dremel. So obviously drills are more versatile than punches because you don't have, you know, the limitations of the size of your punch, but drills are more cumbersome. Drills are less, you know, easy to transport. For instance, if I'm going to go somewhere and I'm taking, you know, a project with me, I'm probably not going to pack my flex shaft. I'm probably going to pack this little hole punch instead. But it does require a little bit of kind of reactive engineering or proactive engineering. I guess that would be proactive engineering. Just sort of knowing the limitations of your tool and designing around those. Alright, so I just got 2 more holes to punch on my little half moon, and then we're going to add our bead. I'm going to put everything together. Ooh, and Heather is the bringer of chocolate.
It's all there's left.
She's the best. All right, we successfully, okay, y'all. So have you thrown the bag away yet?
No.
How many ounces was that bag? So after Easter, my mother in the clearance Easter candy found and purchased for me
31 ounces.
the 31 ounce bag of Cadbury mini eggs. Okay, look, head for scale. This was a giant bag of Cadbury mini eggs. We have finally managed to polish it off. And I think it was 70% off or something like that. So I think she paid like $2.75 for it. I don't even know if they came in that size. But yep, apparently that is the Texas size of the Cadbury mini eggs. So I now have what I'm assuming is half of the last of them. So I have 6 of the last 12 Cadbury mini eggs.
No, you have 6 of the last 8.
Oh, well, why didn't you divide it in half? Do you want 2 more? I'm good. But she ran out of domas.
Well, I did, but
Won't the chocolate help to ease your pain?
I have hummus and things too.
Okay. All right, so now I've got all my holes punched. Now it's time for me to add my bead. So I'm going to go ahead and cut myself a small piece of my 24 gauge wire, and then we're going to do a top drilled wire wrap. Okay, so this is something that we have. You know, I would have thought so, Sheena. It's actually, I'm not going to say it's impossible. It's quite difficult to eat that many ounces of Cadbury mini eggs all at one sitting. Okay, so now we're going to do a top drilled wire wrap, and we're going to place our pretty labradorite drop right smack in the middle of our pendant, like so. So this is something that's been featured on a couple of tutorials recently, so I'm just going to do it and narrate it. But if you want a deeper dive into top drilled wire wrapping, there are a couple of recent tutorials that we have up, including the deco earrings, that are going to give you a really good overview of this technique. But in the abbreviated, we are going to thread our wire through the hole in our bead. So beads that we call top drilled here at Beading Dreams are beads that are usually teardrop shaped that have a hole right at the point. Some people call these side drilled. It's really just a syntax thing. It's, 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. Right? I think that bag would put anyone in a diabetic coma, even if they weren't diabetic.
Yeah, definitely.
So, isn't that pretty, Sheena? We still have a couple of these left, I believe. But I love labradorite. It's such a cool stone. Okay, so after I have threaded that through, I'm going to bend my wires up against the hole in my bead to create a triangle, and I want the point of the triangle to be directly above the point of my bead. Now I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to grab the long wire directly above the point where there's 2 wires cross, and I'm just going to bend that with my chain nose pliers up like so. All right, so that I have 1 wire that is now. You would like to have a I'm sorry, Sheena, I went back to the Cadbury eggs, and I was like, but we ate them all. Sheena would like to have a labradorite. We can make that happen. All right, so now I have 1 that is centered over the central axis of the bead. And now I'm going to take the short one, the one that is kind of crossing across, and I'm going to wrap it around the long one, and I'm going to do that 1.5 times. You don't want to wrap this too many times, because if you do, your wrap's going to get really long. Heather has definitely earned a cocktail tonight. She had to be boss lady for most of the day today because I was, and then we're going to trim this off and press it in. Yeah, she had to be boss lady for most of the day today because I was off site at an event, which is why I drove to Denton and back. So
I think that one's Sheena's.
Ooh, heck yeah. Okay, yes. All right, Sheena, you have a lab. Labradorite, not a Labrador. That would not fit in your little box.
No.
All right, so now I've made bead on a stick. But yes, the point is that Heather has definitely earned at least a double cocktail tonight, possibly a triple, because it is definitely stressful being the boss person, for sure.
Which is why I'm always delivering you cocktails.
All right, so now we're going to make the loop at the top of this. I'm going to take my round nose pliers, which I said we didn't need, but I was wrong, we do. Hold them so that they're touching the top of that wrap, and we're going to go away. Rotate our pliers, bring it back. Rotate the pliers. Sheena says she'll take a Labrador puppy as well.
Gosh, up. I just gave away my last one.
And that's our lady with a scarf. Oh, unfortunately, Sheena, we ran out of Labrador puppies. There was at the... Ooh, Sheena's bringing French gin next week.
Oh.
Because she's awesome. There was an adorable Labrador, chocolate Labrador at the event that I worked in Denton, and
I never would have come home.
His name was Hershey.
Of course.
Because of course it was. He was adorbs and very, very, very excited about all of the new people in the house. Okay, so now I'm taking my wire and threading it through that hole that's at the top of this little cutout that I've cut out to receive my Labradorite. So there we go. And I'm going to, I never did post it in Discord. We're doing a vintage one tonight, and it's got a weird name, but Heather, I know, remembers it.
Pegu Club, I will post it.
Because she remembers everything. She's posting the recipe in Discord. All right, so now I've got that looped through that hole. I'm going to hold across my loop, and I'm just gonna wrap down until I have reached the wrap that's already there on my teardrop, and I'm going to trim my end off. And oh, I think it's lime juice, so I don't see why you couldn't do a lemon Pegu cocktail and use lemon juice instead of lime juice. So there is my Labradorite sitting in its little happy home. Now, if I were gonna be nitpicky about this, it's sitting a little low. What I might do, you know, after stream is I might actually take my file and I might bring these edges down a little bit more just to give it a little bit more room to hang, and then I just would have to redo that hammering, that beveling of the edge. But when I made my shape, I definitely did not take into account the fact that it was going to be hanging down. The other thing I could do if I wanted is I could bring this up, but if I brought this up, I would have to bring it up above the level of this hole because I'd have to drill another hole, but I could also bring this up a little bit and that would serve the same purpose. So, you know, just because you've added, and I can even do, I mean, if I'm doing the bottom alteration, I can do that with the bead in there. If I'm going to get rid of that hole and punch a new one, obviously the bead has to come out. But the point here is, like, don't feel like you're stuck. Like, something like this is very easy to alter to whatever specifications you need. All right, so now it's time to put this baby together. So I'm gonna need 3 jump rings. I'm gonna need a jump ring to put together these 2, and then a jump ring to attach to the chain, and then 2 jump rings to attach the clasp to the chain, so that makes 5 jump rings total. How much chain you need is just depending on how long you want to make your necklace. I think I like something like this at 16 or 18 inches for me, because with a pendant like that, of course, you know, as a woman, at some point it's just going to drop right down inside your shirt, which is never, you know, the desirable outcome. So if I want 16 inches and my centerpiece is 1.5 inches, and say my clasp is 1/2 inch, so I need 14 inches, so 2 7-inch pieces of chain. Yes, that was fast math, but I think everyone can probably follow because it wasn't that difficult.
I just don't listen to your math anymore.
That is the smartest way. If don't listen to me, do your own math, because my math is questionable and often problematic. All right, so now I'm going to grab my 2 pairs of chain nose pliers. When you're opening jump rings, you could absolutely, so there was a question, can you make it adjustable so you could wear it, say, with an open neck shirt like I'm wearing, and then in the winter wear it over a sweater or a turtleneck? Absolutely. What you would do to make it adjustable is you could either use just a larger length chain in general, or you could link a piece of larger length chain. And by larger length chain, I mean something, you know, that's just got a link that's big enough for a clasp to actually clasp into it. You could link 1 inch or 2 of that onto the end of your chain. The other thing, and I don't think I'm wearing any today, am I? Nope, that was yesterday. The other thing that I like to do is actually make myself clip-on extenders. So I'll take a length of chain that's, you know, 3-4 inches, and I'll just put a spring ring or a lobster claw onto it, and then I can clip it onto any necklace. So I don't necessarily have to have a permanent extender on anything, but I have everything, but I have one that I can put onto anything. So I'm going to take my jump ring and I'm going to open it up. So I'm going to take 1 pliers, 2 pliers, and twist. And then I'm going to put 1 through that hole. I want to make sure, so when I do this, the easiest way to make sure that everything's going to turn out right is to put them face to face. So the sanded side is the front face. I've got front face of my pendant to front face of my little half moon. Close your ring. When you close your jump ring, make sure you close it so there's no space in between. And then unfold it, and now you've got all of your fronts together. Hey, Jenny! Jenny, are you back in Dallas? You should be back in Dallas, right? If so, why haven't we seen you? All right, again, open my jump ring. Now I'm going to add my chain. Also, apparently I'm going to throw it on the floor. Also, Jenny, if you just outed yourself as being back in Dallas and you didn't mean to, forget I said anything. We're not actually judging you for not coming to see us. Oh, Lordy. So much bending and so little flexibility in my joints. Okay, so that jump ring definitely ran away when I dropped everything on the floor. I'm just going to grab another one. Yay! Jenny's back in town. That's exciting. Hooray! All right. Okay, really, computer? You're just really excited about the power saving tonight, apparently. Okay, so jump ring through my little half moon, and then through my chain. And then we're going to close that up. Once again, close so there's no space in between, all right? You shouldn't be able to see any light in between, and if you have normal fingernails, not fake fingernails like me, you shouldn't be able to get a fingernail in there anymore either. I'm going to repeat on the other side. Open, twist it open. Drop that on there. Drop your chain on there. And then close it. One of the reasons that I keep slipping and dropping things, I'll show you in a minute. This is the thing that happens with your chain nose pliers when you use them a lot, is see how my pliers don't actually meet at the end anymore? There is definitely space in between them that shouldn't be there. That's just a sign of an old and well-used pair of chain nose, so at that point usually that's when I'll relegate that to being my spare pair, and I will get a new pair. Of course, I recently misplaced all of my tools, so I am refusing to buy new tools because I swear I'm going to find my tools, but I'm pretty sure the only way I'm going to find my tools is if I buy new ones. So we're going to open this ring, and I'm just using a little S-hook clasp, so I'm going to attach my S-hook to the ring, and then I'm going to attach my ring to the chain, like so, and then I'm going to close it up. And then last jump ring goes on the other side. So once again, open that jump ring up. Attach that to the chain, and attach it to the clasp. Maybe we should just seed the parking spaces like with screws after we close. And there you go. So that's the slightly abbreviated with only one half moon version of our Casablanca necklace. Still fun though. Like I still like the half moon is just kind of being a little bit of extra, you know, sort of tying the pendant into the rest of the necklace rather than just plopping the pendant on a chain. Not that there's anything wrong with that either. It's just interesting to, you know, kind of play with the metal and use the technique to, you know, kind of bring that look through the whole piece and make something a little bit fun and different. So thank you so much for hanging out with us on the Beating Dreams tutorial stream. That was our Casablanca necklace. This is the one that I just finished on stream. This was my prototype, so my prototype did have 2 more of the little half moon links, so that's definitely a design option that you can access. I was trying to end mostly on time, which I kind of did, so super happy about that. So I'm Allison from Beating Dreams in Dallas, Texas, and we are an actual brick and mortar retail bead store. We do have premises here on Lovers Lane in Dallas, and if you're local in Dallas, you can come and visit us 6 days a week. We're here Monday through Saturday from 1 p.m. until 6 p.m. If you're not local in Dallas, you can find us on this channel, twitch.tv/Beating Dream, 5 times a week with complimentary tutorials. We do stream Monday through, not Monday anymore, sorry, Wednesday. Wednesday's the day I meant. Wednesday through Saturday at, bye Tina, we'll see you in a bit. Wednesday through Saturday at 6 p.m. Central Time, plus Thursdays at noon, and we do live merchandise sales every Wednesday and every Saturday at 7:30 p.m. That means it's a sale night, so coming up in about, I'm going to say probably 20-30 minutes, so probably around 7:45, There you go. Around 7:45, we'll be back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beating Dream with our live merchandise sale. We are going to be doing 8-inch gemstone strands tonight because my 8-inch gemstone strand trunk show is leaving us. And I want to give you all a last shot at it before it goes away. So, everyone, who's coming for the sale? Pour yourself a cocktail, grab yourself some hydration, maybe grab a snack, get comfy, get cozy. And get ready for some retail therapy right in the comfort of your living room, office, or wherever you happen to watch the Beating Dream stream. I am going to go do closing things. I'm going to shove some food in my face, and I will see you all back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beating Dream in about 30 minutes.